The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon in late July of 2011 at exactly 3:47 p.m. Jake Thompson would remember the time because he'd been watching the clock, counting down the hours until the weekend. He was in his office at the John Deere dealership in Mason City, Iowa. A small room with a metal desk, filing cabinets, and walls covered with promotional posters showing gleaming green equipment in perfect fields. Jake was 41 years old, had been selling farm equipment for 15 years, and he was finalizing paperwork for what would be the biggest sale of his month, maybe his quarter. A brand new John Deere S690 combine, fresh from the factory, loaded with every available option. Premium cab package, full touchscreen display, yield monitoring, automatic header height control, leather seats, the works. The machine was a monster, a technological marvel capable of harvesting 400 acres of corn in a single day under ideal conditions. It could practically drive itself. The engineers at John Deere had packed more computing power into that combine than NASA had used to put men on the moon. The price tag reflected that, $387,000. Base price was $315,000, but with all the options Michael Hartley had wanted, it came to $387,000 before taxes and fees. The buyer was Michael Hartley, a 32-year-old farmer from Worth County, about 20 miles northeast of Mason City. Michael had come into the dealership 3 weeks ago, walked around the lot, climbed into the demo S690 they had on display, and fallen in love. Jake had seen it happen dozens of times. A farmer gets into a new combine, feels that leather seat, sees those touchscreens, imagines himself rolling through his fields in air-conditioned comfort, and rational thinking goes right out the window. Michael had signed all the paperwork the previous week. Put down a $10,000 deposit in cash, a check drawn on Farmers State Bank in Fertile, Iowa. Arranged financing through John Deere Financial for the remaining $377,000 at 4.9% interest over 7 years, which came to payments of approximately $5,140 per month. Jake had run the numbers with Michael, shown him the payment schedule, made sure he understood what he was signing up for. Michael had barely blinked. "Corn's at $6.80, Michael had said. "We'll be fine." That's what they all said when commodity prices were high. "We'll be fine. We can afford it. Prices are only going up." Jake had heard it in 2007 and 2008, right before the financial crisis. He'd heard it from farmers who'd bought equipment they couldn't afford, who'd lost farms that had been in their families for generations. But Jake's job wasn't to talk people out of buying equipment. His job was to sell equipment. His managers made that very clear. So Jake had processed Michael's application, got it approved within 48 hours, and scheduled delivery for the following Monday. The combine was currently at the John Deere Distribution Center in Waterloo, being prepped and loaded onto a transport truck. Jake had confirmed the delivery window that morning. Monday between 9 a.m. and noon. Everything was set. Jake would make a $7,200 commission on this sale. That was serious money. Enough to make his whole quarter, enough to get his sales manager off his back about his numbers, enough to take his wife and kids to Disney World, something they'd been talking about for 3 years but couldn't afford. Jake was actually feeling good about this one. Michael seemed responsible, young but motivated. His farm was paid for, inherited from his grandfather. No land debt. That was important. A farmer with no land debt could handle equipment payments easier than someone who was leveraged on everything. Then Jake's phone rang at 3:47 p.m. on Thursday afternoon. The caller ID showed a Worth County number, but not Michael's cell phone. Jake answered. "John Deere of Mason City, this is Jake. Jake, this is Tom Hartley, Michael's father." Jake's stomach dropped. In 15 years of selling farm equipment, he'd learned that when a customer's parent called, it was rarely good news. "Yes, sir, Mr. Hartley. What can I do for you?" "You can turn that truck around," Tom said. His voice was calm but firm, the voice of a man who'd made a decision and wasn't going to be argued out of it. "My son is not buying that combine." Jake felt his commission evaporating in real time. "Mr. Hartley, I understand you might have concerns, but Michael is 32 years old. He's a grown man. He signed a contract that he had no business signing," Tom interrupted. "And I'm calling to inform you that the combine will not be accepted for delivery. If that truck shows up at our farm on Monday, it'll turn right back around. Sir, with all due respect, your son has already signed—" "My son," Tom said, his voice taking on an edge now, "is about to make the same mistake that killed half the farmers in this county 30 years ago. And I'm not going to stand by and watch it happen. You tell your company that the Hartley family will not be taking delivery of that machine. Mr. Hartley, there's a contract. There are cancellation penalties. Your son could lose his deposit, possibly more." "I don't care about the deposit," Tom said. $10,000 is cheap tuition for the lesson my son is about to learn. You have a good day, Jake." The line went dead. Jake sat there for a moment staring at his phone. Then he did what he had to do. He called his sales manager, explained the situation, and within an hour, the transport that had been scheduled to leave Waterloo Monday morning was cancelled. But Jake was curious. What kind of father torpedoes his own son's equipment purchase? What was this lesson Tom Hartley thought was worth $10,000? Jake would find out 6 months later, and it would change how he thought about farming forever. Michael Hartley sat in his father's kitchen that Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, furious in a way he hadn't been since he was a teenager. He'd driven over to his parents' house the moment Jake called him to tell him the deal was dead. His father had intercepted the delivery before it ever left the warehouse. The drive from his house to his parents' farm was only 6 miles, but Michael had spent those 6 miles getting angrier and angrier, rehearsing what he was going to say, how he was going to make his father understand that this was completely unacceptable. "What gives you the right?" Michael demanded the moment he walked through the kitchen door. He didn't even say hello to his mother, just launched right into it. He was standing in the middle of the kitchen, too angry to sit down, his hands clenched at his sides. His father Tom sat at the kitchen table, calm as still water on a windless morning, a cup of coffee in his weathered, work-worn hands. The man looked completely untroubled, which made Michael even angrier. Tom was 68 years old that summer, though he looked older. The sun and wind had carved deep lines into his face, made his skin leather tough. His hair was completely white now, had been since his 50s. He'd been farming the same 640 acres in Worth County since 1967, when he'd taken over from his own father at age 24. He'd survived the farm crisis of the 1980s, when half his neighbors went bankrupt. He'd survived droughts and floods and hailstorms. He'd survived market crashes in 1998 and 2008. He'd raised 2 kids, put them both through college without taking on education debt. He'd never missed a mortgage payment in 44 years of farming, and he'd paid off the farm completely in 1995. "Sit down, Michael," Tom said quietly, not looking up from his coffee. "I don't want to sit down. I want to know why you called the dealership and killed my sale. That combine was exactly what we need. Our 9600 is 20 years old. It breaks down constantly. We lose time, we lose crop, we lose money. I've been planning this for months. I ran all the numbers. I showed you the numbers, and you went behind my back and cancelled it." Michael's voice had gotten louder with each sentence, and by the end he was nearly shouting. "Sit down," Tom repeated, and this time there was steel in his voice, the tone that meant he wasn't asking any more. He was telling. Michael sat. He pulled out a chair hard enough that it scraped across the linoleum floor, sat down heavily, crossed his arms across his chest like a petulant child. He knew he looked ridiculous, knew he was acting like a teenager instead of a 32-year-old man, but he couldn't help it. His mother Linda was standing by the sink, her back to both of them, washing dishes that were already clean. She did that when she was uncomfortable, when there was tension in the house. She'd just keep washing dishes or wiping counters, staying busy, staying out of it. Michael could tell from the set of her shoulders that she'd been part of whatever decision his father had made. Tom took a long, slow sip of his coffee. He set the cup down carefully in the exact center of the saucer, a precise movement. Then he looked at his son. "You know how much that combine cost?" Tom asked. $387,000, Michael said through clenched teeth. "I know what I signed up for, Dad. I'm not an idiot. I read the contract. I understood the terms. And you know what your payment would have been? About $5,500 a month for 7 years, Michael said. $66,000 a year. I did the math, Dad. I did all the math. We can afford it. We're farming 640 acres. Corn's at $6.80 a bushel. Beans are at $13. We had a great year last year. We're going to have a great year this year. The money is there." "Can you?" Tom asked, his voice maddeningly calm. "Can you really afford it? Let me ask you something. What's corn selling for right now? Tell me again." Michael knew the answer. Everyone in farming knew the answer. In July of 2011, he checked grain prices every morning on his phone before he even got out of bed. About $6.80 a bushel at the elevator in Fertile. Soybeans are at $13.20. Those are good prices, Dad. Really good prices. "And that's the highest it's been in your lifetime," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "Highest it's been in my lifetime, too, and I'm 68 years old. You know why it's that high?" Michael shrugged, irritated that his father was asking questions when they should be discussing his completely unacceptable interference in Michael's business decisions. Ethanol demand, export demand, drought concerns in the Western Corn Belt, weather problems in South America, supply and demand, Dad, basic economics, high school stuff. "It's high because people think it's going to keep going higher," Tom said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "That's the only reason. Every farmer in the Midwest is looking at $6.80 corn and thinking it's the new normal, thinking it's never coming back down. Same reason it was high in 1979 and 1980, right before everything collapsed and we had the worst farm crisis since the Depression. Same reason it was high in 2007 and early 2008, right before the financial crisis. History repeating itself, and nobody wants to see it." "This is different," Michael started to say. "It's never different," Tom interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "That's the lesson you need to learn, son. And I'm willing to lose $10,000 of your money to teach it to you. It's never different. The circumstances change, the technology changes, the names change, but the pattern is always the same. Prices go up, farmers get confident, farmers borrow heavily, prices fall, farmers lose everything. I watched it happen in the 80s. I swore I'd never let it happen to my family. That's the lesson you need to learn, and I'm willing to lose $10,000 to teach it to you." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "When you called me 2 weeks ago and told me you'd ordered that combine, I didn't say anything. I wanted to think about it. I wanted to see if you'd come to your senses on your own, but you didn't, so I called the dealership. You had no right." "I had every right," Tom said, his voice rising now. "You're farming my land, son. I haven't retired yet. I haven't signed anything over to you. You're working this farm with me, and as long as that's true, I have a say in major purchases, especially purchases that could put everything at risk." Michael felt like he'd been slapped. "You're using the land as leverage? That's what this is?" "This isn't about leverage," Tom said, his voice dropping back to normal. "This is about saving you from yourself. You're 32 years old. You don't remember the 80s. You were born in 1979. You have no idea what it's like to watch your neighbors lose everything. But I do. I watched it happen to half the people I grew up with." He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the farm he'd spent his life working. In 1980, Tom said, there was a farmer named Bill Peterson, farmed about a mile south of here. Bill had bought 2 new combines in 1978 and 1979, right when corn prices were high, borrowed the money, figured he'd pay it back easy. Then 1980 hit. Grain embargo, interest rates went to 20%, corn prices fell to $2.20. Bill couldn't make his payments. Bank foreclosed in 1982. He lost everything. Last I heard, he was working at a meat-packing plant in Sioux City. Tom turned back to face his son. Bill Peterson wasn't a bad farmer. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't stupid. He just made his biggest investment at the wrong time. He bought equipment when prices were high, and then prices fell, and he lost everything. I'm not Bill Peterson, Michael said. No, Tom agreed, because I'm not going to let you be. The kitchen was quiet for a long moment. Linda turned on the faucet, started washing dishes, the sound of water filling the silence. That 9600 we have, Tom said, sitting back down. You're right, it's 20 years old, it breaks down, but you know what else it is. Old, Michael said bitterly. Paid for, Tom said. It's paid for. We don't owe a dime on it. When it breaks, we fix it. Parts are cheap for a machine that old. I can rebuild most of that combine myself in the shop. And every year that we don't have a combine payment, that's money we keep. Money we save. Money that stays in our pocket instead of going to John Deere Financial. He pulled a sheet of paper from his shirt pocket, unfolded it. Michael recognized it as one of the farm's financial statements, the monthly accounting they did together. Look at this, Tom said, sliding it across the table. Last year, we cleared $147,000 farming 640 acres. That's after all expenses, after taxes, after everything. That's what we actually made. Michael had seen these numbers before. He nodded. Now, Tom continued, if we take on a payment of $5,500 a month, that's $66,000 a year. Almost half our profit gone. Just like that, gone to pay for a machine. But we'd be more efficient, Michael argued. The new combine is faster, has better grain handling, loses less. How much less? Tom asked. What? How much less grain would we lose with a new combine versus our old one? Give me a number. Michael hesitated. I don't know exactly. The salesman said what you wanted to hear, Tom interrupted, but let's say generously that we lose 2% of our crop to the limitations of our old combine, inefficiency, grain loss, whatever, 2% of our crop. He pulled out a calculator, started punching numbers. We harvest about 160,000 bushels of corn and soybeans combined in an average year. 2% of that is 200 bushels. At today's prices, averaging corn and beans together, that's maybe $20,000 worth of crop. So yes, a new combine might save us $20,000 a year in lost efficiency. He looked up at Michael. But it would cost us $66,000 a year in payments. So we'd be spending $66,000 to save $20,000. We'd be $46,000 worse off every year. For 7 years, that's $322,000 in lost profit over the life of the loan. Michael opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The math was undeniable. But, he said, searching for a counter-argument, the old combine will eventually die. We'll have to replace it anyway. Eventually, yes, Tom agreed. And when that day comes, we'll buy another used combine. Pay cash. Like we've always done, like my father did, like his father did. He refolded the financial statement, put it back in his pocket. I know that new combine is attractive, Tom said, his voice gentler now. I know it's got air conditioning and a comfortable seat and GPS and all the fancy technology. I know our old 9600 is loud and hot and breaks down. But I also know that in 5 years, when corn is back to $3.50 a bushel and you're staring at a payment you can't make, you'll wish you'd listened to me today. Michael was quiet. His anger had faded, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first glimmering of understanding. "You really think prices are going to fall?" he asked. "I know they are," Tom said. "I don't know when. Might be this year, might be 5 years from now, but they will. They always do. And when they do, the farmers who survive are the ones who don't have big payments." He stood up, put his hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm sorry I went behind your back and cancelled that combine. I should have talked to you first. But I'm not sorry I did it, because in 30 years when you're my age, you're going to thank me." Michael left his parents' house that night, confused and frustrated. He drove home to his own house, a modest 3-bedroom ranch he'd bought in 2008, and told his wife Sarah what had happened. Sarah listened quietly. She was a nurse, didn't come from a farming family, didn't always understand the agricultural side of things. But she understood debt, she understood payments, and she understood the fear in Michael's voice when he talked about the farm crisis his father had survived. "Maybe your dad's right," she said quietly. "About what? About waiting, about not taking on that kind of debt right now." Michael wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because deep down he knew his father was right. He just didn't want to admit it. The next morning, Michael drove over to his parents' farm. His father was already in the shop, working on the 9600 combine, getting it ready for harvest. The machine was torn apart, feeder house off, header unhooked, guards and sections laid out on the workbench. "What are you doing?" Michael asked. "Preventive maintenance," Tom said without looking up. "If we're going to run this combine another year, we're going to run it right. I'm replacing every worn part, every suspect bearing, every cracked belt. When harvest starts, this machine is going to run like it's supposed to." Michael picked up a wrench, started helping. They worked in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable silence that comes from years of working together. Finally, Michael said, "I called the dealership this morning. Told them to keep the deposit. Consider it payment for wasting their time." Tom looked up. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did," Michael said, "because you were right, about all of it. I got caught up in wanting the new shiny thing, and I forgot the basics. Forgot what you taught me." Tom set down his wrench, wiped his hands on a rag. "What did I teach you? That equipment is a tool, not a trophy. That the best combine is the one that's paid for. That you can't farm if you're working for the bank instead of yourself." Tom nodded slowly. "Those are good lessons. I'm glad you remember them." They went back to work. By noon, they had the 9600 completely serviced, every maintenance item checked off, every wear part replaced. Tom started it up, let it run, listened to the engine, checked for leaks. "Sounds good," he said, shutting it down. "This'll get us through another harvest, maybe 2 or 3 if we take care of it." "And then?" Michael asked. "And then we'll find a good used combine at an auction somewhere," Tom said. "Pay cash, like always." That fall, they harvested 640 acres with the old 9600. It broke down twice, once for a broken belt and once for a plugged feeder house. But they fixed it, kept going, and finished the harvest in decent time. Corn prices held steady through the fall, $6.80 in July, $6.50 in October, $6.20 in December. Still high, still profitable. But Michael watched those prices every day, and he started to see what his father had been trying to tell him. The high prices wouldn't last. They never did. In 2012, corn hit $8 a bushel, driven by drought and panic. Farmers who'd bought equipment in 2011 and 2012 thought they were geniuses. The ones who'd waited, like Tom and Michael, looked like fools. But in 2013, prices started to fall. $7 in spring, $6 in summer, $5 by fall. By 2014, corn was at $4. By 2015, it was $3.50. The farmers who'd bought new equipment at the peak were underwater. Their payments stayed the same, but their income had been cut in half. Some of them sold out. Some of them just walked away, let the bank take everything. Tom and Michael kept farming. The 9600 kept running. In 2014, when corn was at $4 and times were tight, Tom pulled Michael aside one day and said, "You see now why we didn't buy that S690. Michael nodded. He saw. Boy, did he see. "If we'd taken on that payment," Tom continued, "we'd be losing money right now. We'd be staring at bankruptcy just like half the county, but we don't have that payment, so we're still profitable, even at $4 corn, not making much but surviving." In 2016, their old 9600 finally died. The engine seized up mid-harvest, a catastrophic failure that would cost more to fix than the machine was worth. It had given them 46 years of service, had harvested thousands of acres, had never missed a payment because there'd never been a payment to miss. They bought a used case IH 2388 at an auction in Minnesota. The machine was from 2007, had 2,400 separator hours on it, needed some work. They paid $68,000 cash. Tom and Michael spent 2 weeks in the shop rebuilding the feeder house, replacing wear parts, servicing everything. When they were done, they had a combine that would run for another decade, and they didn't owe anyone a dime for it. Jake Thompson, the salesman who'd almost sold them the S690 back in 2011, heard about it. He was still at the dealership in Mason City, still selling equipment. He called Michael one day, just to check in. "Heard you guys bought a used case," Jake said. "We did," Michael confirmed. "Could have sold you a new one," Jake said. "We've got some great financing options right now." "Not interested," Michael said, cutting him off. "My dad taught me something back in 2011 and I'm not forgetting it." "What's that?" Jake asked. "That the salesman is not your friend," Michael said. "No offense, Jake. You're a good guy. But your job is to sell me equipment whether I need it or not, whether I can afford it or not. My job is to remember that." There was a pause on the line. Then Jake said, "You know what? Your dad's a smart man. I wish more of my customers had listened to their dads." In 2020, Tom Hartley turned 77. He officially retired, signed the farm over to Michael. By then, Michael was 41, the same age his father had been during the 80s crisis, and he understood now what his father had been trying to protect him from. The Hartley farm, 640 acres in Worth County, is still operating today. Michael farms it with his oldest son, who's learning the same lessons. They run used equipment, pay cash for everything, and sleep easy at night because they don't owe the bank anything. In Michael's office, framed on the wall, is a copy of that cancelled contract from 2011, the S690 that never was, the $387,000 mistake he almost made. Under it, Michael had written in marker, "The combine my dad wouldn't let me buy. The payment that would have killed us, the lesson that saved the farm." And below that, in his father's handwriting, added years later, "The best investment is the one you don't make. Tom Hartley." Michael's son asked him once why he kept that framed on the wall. "Why remind yourself of a mistake you almost made?" "Because," Michael said, "the moment I forget how close I came to losing everything is the moment I'm at risk of doing it again. Your grandfather saved this farm with one phone call. I never want to forget that." Delis, the farm crisis of the 1980s taught a generation of farmers about the dangers of debt. But that lesson fades with time, with distance, with new generations who didn't live through it. Tom Hartley's phone call to that John Deere dealership in 2011 was his way of making sure the lesson didn't die, making sure his son learned it without having to lose everything first. And it worked. The Hartley farm is still there, still profitable, still in the family, all because a father loved his son enough to tell him no.